Well, kia ora and welcome to our planning meeting for Try This. I'm going to open with karakia for us. So, e te whānau, whaia te mātauranga kia marama, kia whaia ta ki ngā mahi katoa, tūmaia tūkaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, which just says, as we gather here, let us seek knowledge for understanding, have purpose in all that we do, stand tall and be strong, and show respect for each other. So welcome. It's great to see you all. I will, as usual, I'll just start my slides here. We're on to session key number 5. Tell me when you can see this. Hang on 1 second. Can you see the slides? Yeah. So today our focus is on key number 5, which is, of all the keys that are in the book, is probably the one that we use the most often. It's called Start a Story, and it's it's a fantastic way to just drop into the imagined world through the storytelling. And the more that we're working in this drama for learning, dramatic inquiry kind of approach, the more Tim and I are thinking of it in terms of storytelling. So, let me just pause there and say for the recording that it is just me talking today. We don't have Tim because unfortunately he's been unwell, but I'll do my very best to represent what I've learned from Tim about this key. So, start a story. And although we've called it Start a Story, it's a key that you can also use to continue a story, to return to a story. So if there was time, we might have called it time and space, we might have called it Start a Story or Go Back to a Story. But it's probably probably the most useful and frequently used tool in the book. And what I'll do is I'll share an example of it, and then we might have a go at planning one together because it's such a short little one that we can probably have a go at planning one. So just before we get on to that, we're going to, as usual, we're going to reflect on the previous key. And you've already told me that of our group here, nobody's had a go since we last met. So I might just share one with you, or no, that's what I thought I'd do, is have a look at it together, recap how to do it, and we might have a think together of how we might use one in a New Zealand context. So I'm going to be putting you to work today. So just, this is back to key 4, step into history. Such a useful one for New Zealand teachers at the moment because you'll see we have a new history curriculum in New Zealand, so people are trying to teach history for the very first time. So let's just, for the purposes of this, just to show how quickly it is, let's do this together. Say we were going to teach children about the moment when there's a moment in New Zealand history where women were petitioning for the vote, right? And Aotearoa New Zealand was the first place to give women the vote, at least Western women. I mean, it's useful to remember that pre-European history we didn't have a voting as we understand it now, but we had lots of Māori women leaders. So, I mean, aside from that, in the Western parliamentary tradition, and there's a moment in that history where there's an enormous petition, a big roll of paper that's been collected, and it's taken to Parliament and it's unrolled dramatically down the central aisle of the Parliament. Can you imagine that moment? Let's say we were going to step into that moment with children, right? So what you're going to co-teach that with me, and we're going to see how quickly we can plan it. Here's the planning that we need to do. We've decided on our moment. What's a resource we might choose, even if we don't know anything about that context? I think we can plan this. What might be something we could choose to drop children into that moment? An image, a piece of text, a video, a recording, a narrative, a painting. What kinds of things could we use? Any thoughts? Go.
I was thinking about newspapers, images, or narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, captured the essence of the moment.
Yeah. So a real newspaper article from the time. Yep. Perfect. Any other thoughts?
I've done this moment.
Have you? Oh, wonderful. What
I
did
have, and I don't know if this is the final petition or an earlier one, but wasn't it wheeled into Parliament in a
it was
wheelbarrow?
in a
It
wheelbarrow?
was. So I wheeled a wheelbarrow into my classroom one day and then mimed the
There
rolling
you
out
go.
of the signed petition.
There
Yeah.
you go. So we could have the wheelbarrow. We could have an image of a wheelbarrow with a large roll of paper. You can see some ways in, right? Um, so, and again, we won't spend too long on this, but I'm just showing you how quickly you can turn around and plan with this key. And if we were to write a short narrative to introduce the context, well, here we go. This is the key that we're going to be using for our main part of today. So a short narrative. We'll come back to that. But imagine that we've written a short narrative using the key that we're about to learn today to just introduce that as a story, and then we might rearrange the classroom. So you can imagine how we might rearrange the classroom in this context with a long aisle down the middle. Are you getting a sense of how quick it is to kind of plan this? And then here are our steps. So we would start the session by using the resource, either the newspaper article, or perhaps we would start with the wheelbarrow because it's just such a lovely evocative one. You might use both, right? Use the what I mean about the wheelbarrow is it's mysterious, is what I mean, rather than evocative. So you might wheel in the wheelbarrow, then have the newspaper article, then tell the story, and then invite the students to step three, invite students to imagine being someone alive at that time. Now, as a general rule, if we're doing actual history, rather than imagining being the significant historical figures at that time, someone else who might have been present, so that we're not taking that liberty of standing in the shoes of someone real. So who else might have been around other than the known historical figures when that paper was rolled down the aisle?
Mm, I would say clerks from the.
That's exactly where I went, Ulysses. Yeah, so sort of servants or clerks around the Houses of Parliament, listening in, seeing what was going on. Um, then step four, we would invite them to represent their thoughts. Write some kind of response to what happened in this historical moment, right? Talking, and then step five, discuss their ideas. This is a point at which if they start, using ideas that aren't appropriate for the time, we will gently address those. But and also this is an opportunity for talking about different historical perspectives that may have been held at that time. So everybody, in the room may well have jotted down things that were pro women, but we can say, well, at the time there were very divided views. So let's look at some of the things that were written at that time, that were very pro what the women were doing and what very anti what the women were doing. See how this kind of works for this moment. Then ask the children to come back together. Set the students a task inside the fiction, holding them in the moment. So what is something that someone might have done at that moment of time, in that moment of time, that is appropriate to the learning that these children are doing? That's a slightly harder one, but what's a task? They don't have to do this as clerks. They could do it as somebody else.
I don't know why or whom, but I figure perhaps counting the signatures in the thing.
What a great idea. I love it. Some kind of response to the signature, counting the signatures in the thing. Oh, I love it. So as clerks indeed, they could say, well, we need to see how many women's signatures we've got. Do we recognize any of them? And that takes them straight into history, doesn't it? I love it. I really love that one. I had them doing some task about I had them doing some task about, I didn't bring it with me, but some task around the Houses of Parliament, um, that they were moving between the different spaces, and that gave us an opportunity to look at the Houses of Parliament map. If you look at the back of the back of the book, I've got this example as an extended example at the back of the book. And then they create they step into like a sort of an image or a photograph of that time. So I guess we could also get them to do the responses of the people in the house to this big rolled out pieces of paper. I expect you did that, did you, Kylie? Some kind of drama to enact the shock and horror and different responses to that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I remember doing a moment where we were imagining that we were people gathered outside Parliament House and were cheering, like as the wheelbarrow was coming through.
That would fit for step 7 really well as well. So it's a task within the fiction, not necessarily within the house, but so we're the people pro women and we're cheering that moment. Yeah, perfect. And then we invite them to present that moment as if they are in a picture. So in your classroom, Ulysses, people are bent around the text, sort of looking and counting the signatures. In yours, Kylie, there's cheers and possible jeers outside the house. And so that takes us into the drama. Children are in the drama at that point. And then ask the children to reflect what it may have been like to be those people at the time, voice their thoughts, and then bring them out. So that's the step into history key, and we just planned one very, very quickly. And for all time, it will probably feel like step into history is about that moment, because that's what we've just done. But of course, it could be about any moment. So I thought this week, instead of just showing you an example that a teacher had done, I would quickly step us through it to show how quickly we can get there. Thanks for sharing that one with me. So we'll move on. We'll move on to start a story. And as I say, it's actually part of that key that we've just seen before. Did you see where it said write a narrative and share a narrative? That narrative is the story. And so what Tim and I did was we pulled that out as a separate key, because sometimes you just sometimes you want to use this one sort of on its own in a chain. What I will say, when I say in a chain, what you want to use it in a sequence of keys, and so it's worth having it on its own as an idea. But what I will say is it doesn't work on its own. This is the first key we've encountered in the book that can't be a whole lesson on its own. It needs to kind of have, I suppose you could have it as a sort of micro activity, but the suggestion is that you'll use this to start or to link together different keys that will make I think you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to share with you the New Zealand example from the book, and I think this one will resonate for you, Jen. I'm just going to as I always do, follow the steps that are in the book and the text. I've got it here on my phone today because I haven't got the book with me. See how you go with this, and then we'll talk about what the benefits are, what it does for you. So right now we're outside of a drama. There's nothing present. The book just suggests that you say, okay, I thought we might make a story together. So this is if you're starting a drama or a dramatic inquiry investigation in this way. I thought we might start a story together. I'll start it off and see if you feel like joining in. So we're deep in the bush of Maungahonga Valley. Our leather walking boots are creaking as we go carefully, picking our way along the edge of a stream. Our packs are heavy on our shoulders. Our backpacks are heavy on our shoulders. The tools we are carrying make up most of the weight. And the sky overhead glows with the last of the winter sunshine. But down here under the canopy, it's already growing dark. We'll have to find a spot to set up camp soon. But before we do, we strain our ears for a change in the sound of the stream. And we hear it up ahead, a surge of water as it rushes over the large grey boulders. Quietly, our team inches forward. No one says a word. We can all feel the charge in the air. This is it. This is the place where Joan Whiffen made her discovery that changed the world. So what did you make of that? You can answer. So what did you make of that?
Intriguing.
Bit of intrigue, even though it went on for a while, was still intriguing. What else?
Um, we had thought, who are we? What sort of team are we here for? And what is our mission? It
Right.
was
So
really
you picked up that we were a team,
Mhm.
and what's our mission? Have you got any clues what team kind of team we might be? I know you know,
I
Jen.
That's a title.
Carry on, Jen.
I when I did this with my students, the team that they felt that they might have been were scientists, or they're reporters, or they could be a team of amateur paleontologists,
Right.
or they're just a team of Joan Whiffin's fan base. Don't know. We were all very inquisitive in terms of what sort of team it might be, because their stories might have gone in so many different ways.
And I love that you've shared that those children had multiple answers like that, because as it says in step 4 here, keep the discussion speculative. Oh yes, well perhaps we are. Perhaps we're reporters coming in, and in which case the tools we carry will be the tools of that craft. Or perhaps we are paleontologists, some kind of, we're coming in with something to, yeah, the tools will be to bash those rocks, or carefully extract something. And it's very speculative at this
Mm,
stage, because this is quadrant 1, or moving from quadrant 1 to 2. We can stay playful at this point. You're not going to accidentally, as a teacher, end up with a team of reporters when you wanted a team of something else. So, but you're keeping that sense of possibility open. Did we hear anything else about interesting or um, important in that story that tells us a little bit about where we are? Anything you'd like to add, Ulysses?
I was thinking about the river and how it plays somewhat of important character within the narrative.
Tell me more about that.
Well, it's funny how it gets at the front of the narrative. I'm wondering whether it has to do something with the thing we're going to discover or the thing we're going to encounter.
What a good
mm.
observation. And you don't even know New Zealand history, and you picked that. Right. Wonderful. So yeah, after quite a bit of this, exploration and wondering, and of course the children's responses might be open-ended because they know nothing, or they might blurt out, "Oh, well, it's Joan Whiffen. She's the one who discovered dinosaurs in New Zealand." In which case we go with that. We it's a kind of also a testing of prior knowledge. So you do quite a lot of that, and then it says step 5 is follow up with an activity that gives the students opportunities to develop the story and become more involved with the creation of the narrative. Now, the reason we use that wording was sometimes this key will be used in an entirely fictional context. In the UK session, planning session, we're going to see an example that's not historical. It's a complete fantasy world, in which case we can co-construct a complete new world. In this example, because we'd be trying to teach the children about a real historical event, we would be co-constructing within much tighter boundaries, wouldn't we? We would have we would be wanting to look at a narrative where we were either going in with Joan Whiffen, so in which case our time and our date would be that time, or we'd be going into the bush today to rediscover. Oh, I think we've already said that, haven't we? This is the place where Joan Whiffen made her discovery, so we've already set it is in the present day, and we'd be wanting to make sure that the things we put into that world were appropriate. We're not going to suddenly have three-headed dinosaurs if there weren't any. So I'm going to stop it there. I'm not going to worry too much about that follow-up activity, because really it's the story that's the heart of this one, and we're going to kind of pick apart how we did it. So it was quite a long story in this example. What did you? I can read it again if you like, but I might do that. I might read it again and tell me what you notice is in the story, because that is the secret to this key. So it starts by saying, we're deep in the bush of Mangahonga Valley. So what's that doing? What's that giving us?
City.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're deep in the bush. If we had started our bush, if we'd started our story, we're inside the pod of the space shuttle, we would be in an entirely different setting. So it's going to do that, and often it's going to do that in the first line. Our leather walking boots creak as we carefully pick our way along the edge of the stream. What have we got there?
A piece of action,
Mhm.
a character that is leading the way.
Exactly. We've got some action. We've also got some sound in there, haven't we? We've actually got three things. Our leather boots creak, which is a sound, as we pick our way along the edge of a stream, which is a bit of setting, and it's also a bit of action, a bit of going. So there's lots in there. Our packs are heavy on our shoulders. The tools we carry make up most of the weight. So it's again, it's telling us, I think what it's doing, I wrote it, but I can't quite remember what I had in mind. I think what it's doing is edging us towards the characters that we are, but using a process that we really want to use in all our writing, called show not tell. Show not tell, and they teach this to children in England. So instead of saying we are archaeologists or paleontologists, which would be to tell, we show that we are them by talking in our story about what we're carrying. The sky overhead glows with the last of the winter sunshine. What have we got there?
Time of a year.
We've got a time, and it's evoked through light. Right. Oh, says Kylie, I know this game. This is
I
the
know now.
this is the 6 dimensions. Yeah. It's such a good trick, isn't it? It's worth paring it down. And on the next slide, I'll show you exactly what we're using to compose this story. It's all in the book, but it's great to get really conscious of the devices that we're using here. I'll do a little bit more. So the last of the winter sunshine is overhead, but down here under the canopy, it's already growing dark. So we've got that contrast from light to dark. So I'm going to kind of reveal I'm going to stop reading the story and sort of reveal the sources now of what we're doing. So what we're doing when we're writing a narrative is we're making sure that the narrative introduces the context, and you'll be familiar with this hexagon from the book. But when we're talking about a context, it's made up of 6 things: the characters, or the people or animals or whatever the characters are in the scene; the location, where we are, so who we are or who's there, where we are; the events, what's going on; the time, so the time of day, but also whether it's now, whether it's in the past, whether it's potentially in the future; the tension, the what's up; and the focus, which is kind of the main thing that we focused on. That's what we mean by that in this case. So who we are, where we are, what's happening, when it is, what's up, and what's our main focus, if you want to think about those 6 things as W's. So if you were to go through that piece of writing, you would see it has all of those in it, and the tension is what kind of made it intriguing. It has all those things in it without telling us those things. It does say we're deep in the bush of Mangahonga Valley, but it doesn't say we're in the bush in New Zealand. We are some paleontologists. We're walking along the river. It's it's modern day. Oh, I wonder if we might find what we might find. We're focused on going and getting Joan Whiffin's dinosaur bones. It doesn't do that. Instead, what it does is use, so you've got those things plus the color or the craft of the 6 dimensions. And I don't know if we've talked about 6 dimensions before. Are these new to you, Ulysses?
Well, I've read the book.
So you've seen them in the book, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, they really are the most useful tool for this key and for others, and even for those times in your teaching where you want to use the storyteller voice, the narrator voice, and that is, you know, the six being the contrasts of light and dark, movement and stillness, sound and silence. So when we're writing our narratives, so we reach consciously for these. So here we are in the bush, and I think to myself, where is the light? And I come up with a sentence, something like, the sky overhead glows with the last of the winter sunshine. So I turn it into a sentence, and then I think, okay, contrast. Where's the dark? Deep here under the canopy, it is still dark. It's such a useful strategy that I get teachers that I'm working with to go out and practice this, you know, to go outside and actually tune into what's going on in nature around them, or drop them into different scenes, and I get them to practice doing that. And I really recommend doing the same thing. For this key, we don't necessarily need to use all 6. It can grow into quite a long narrative if we do that, but we just need to use some that give a flavor. In the example I shared with you, I did use all of them. I think it was movement and stillness and sound and silence, but just to say, don't stand there preparing your lesson beating yourself up because you haven't got all the 6 dimensions yet. You just need a selection of some of those. So I wondered if we might have a go again like we did earlier. Let me see if we've got loads of time. So if we were going to start a story, let's go with my random other suggestion of we're going to be up in space, because I'm trying to think of something that's completely different from being deep in the New Zealand bush. So what, again, we probably would craft these a little bit, and we're not going to sit and write because we're on video, and that would be very boring for people to watch. But if you don't mind just speaking aloud, what if we're up in a space pod, say, what kind of story could we tell to start to introduce that? And this will be quite fun because we'll be creating our context as we do it. Often as a teacher, you'll have a context in mind and you'll tell a story about it, but we haven't actually got one, so we're going to co-create one. So who are our characters going to be? Who's there? Who are we? Who do you think?
Astronaut.
So we're astronauts, right? So I'm going to give us a sentence, something like, I'm going to try and use the location and one of the 6 dimensions. I'm going to say something like, the light from the dashboard illuminated the faces of the astronauts as they frowned, into their screens. Right, there we go. We're up there. Would anybody else like to offer a sentence that gives us a bit more about location, maybe a bit more about what's going on, maybe a bit more about the time, tension, and maybe weaves in a dimension as well? Go.
Yeah, I would go with she was amazed by her not feeling her own weight, as she had to reach for some tools in order to check on the engine.
Yeah, great. So you're giving us, she's checking on the engine or the jets or whatever they might be, and she as she reaches forward, she's amazed once again at the lack of her weightlessness, as she never stops being amazed by the weightlessness as she reaches for something in the capsule that will help her with with the engine problem that they're having. Right, we're getting this. We're getting this. Lovely. Can anybody come up with another one?
At the
We're
corner of
yeah,
her
go.
at the corner of her eye, as she reaches over to grab that branch, she sees the sunrise peeking over by the left part of the, I don't know, by the earth.
Yeah.
And just the whole the contrast of dark and light there.
Yeah, I've got that. I can see that. I've seen those incredible photos of the Earth, right? So one tip, Jen, is to put the dark into one set statement and the light into another, because it seems to really work in storytelling if you do the light in one and the darkness in the other. Her eyes fell on the through the porthole, and the what was it? The she saw the sunrise, the rays of the sunrise. Is that what you said?
The rays of sunrise just right at the edge of that of the earth peeking out.
Yeah, I've got it. That's nice. And then the darkness, where's the darkness?
The darkness is still on that the side where
Yeah,
they
on the opposite plane of the
opposite.
orb sort of thing. Yeah. See how just slowing down and saying one sense for a sentence and then the contrasting sense for the other sentence. You absolutely have it. That we're there, aren't we? We're up in that spaceship. We've got our astronaut. We've kind of seem to have one. It's a woman. We've got a sense of she's got to go and fix the engine. And there's the light and the dark is outside. How could we build the tension just a little bit? Go,
We could
Kylie.
use sound. We could use sound. So what if we said something like, all the other astronauts fell silent as they hoped she'd be able to fix the problem, or something like that.
Right, great. So
Yeah.
how can we, because you're right, they have got that sense of hope. And I'm just going to push you, because an author will often talk about a sense of hope, but just to practice show not tell. The hope is an internal feeling. So how can we show that kind of hope rather than tell it? Do you know what I mean?
I know. Touching
Yeah.
their hands together in anticipation.
That's it exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the astronauts fell silent. Go on, you've got it.
The astronauts fell silent. Maybe they even held hands and clasped each other's hands in anticipation. Well, we should be able to fix the problem, they thought.
Brilliant. Yeah. And the more we can show and drop away that telling, the better the writing becomes, the better the storytelling becomes, and the more we're modeling that to children. So contrast draft one of that, which was the astronauts fell silent, and they all hoped that she would be able to fix it, to the astronauts fell silent and they clasped their hands as she approached the portal. We've got that sense of urgency and hope through showing rather than telling, and it's such a great thing to practice, and we can teach it to children too. So that's how it goes. That's how start a story goes. We've started a story beautifully there, and as well as doing it to start a drama or start a dramatic inquiry investigation, you can imagine doing it to link between two keys as well. So if we go back to our previous one of Step into History, and we've had the piece of paper go down the aisle, we've done the piece of work as where we've done sort of the photograph from the front page of the paper the next day, if it was a photograph, or engraving of the protesters or the people counting the signatures. If we want to then move on to another key, perhaps encounter someone. Imagine if we were going to encounter the woman who gathered all those signatures together. We could set the scene for that encounter by saying, and meanwhile, the other side of the country, a woman sits in her room. She is a woman who was unable to be in the house today, as no women are admitted. But I'm telling, aren't I? I'm not showing, but you have to do a certain amount of that. And she sits on a chair with wringing her hands. and her eyes lift as she hears the sound of the bell chiming, and she knows that across the country, she imagines the rustle of paper as across country the great roll is unfurled, and there we are in a different scene, ready to encounter someone and have a chat to her about the votes that she's collected. And I'm kind of excited about how this storytelling key, starter story key, can be that little linking device. And I've certainly seen on this trip, I've seen Tim use that a lot. So there we go. I don't know, have you got any questions or thoughts about that key, or experiences of having used it? Or how did that feel today, giving it a go?
Sorry, it's just clearing my throat.
Amazing.
It was nice to have the reminder, or not actually, I think it's the first time I've heard that you don't have to use all 6 dimensions every time, because often I'm struggling to try and fit them all in and my stories get really long. So thank you.
Right.
I think that the magic of it is that doing it through the dimensions and in this way of showing and not telling, you are opening the possibility for participants to rely on their knowledge and on their empathy with the thing that is happening, and then express whatever they know and to explore it. For instance, I was imagining something about, don't know, with the wage of being told that they were not enough for being considered as voters, they roll the barrel. I mean, and then encountering that person to discuss about this action, it would be marvelous.
It would. It would. That you do find that two things that you said there. One is that the show not tell kind of leaves a space for the person, the participant, to do some imagination and to conjure what the meaning is in their own mind. It's so important. In fact, as a training device for our future writers and our future readers, that they can do that imagining. So that little gap between what the writing says and the inference that you have to make is such a crucial one to model, and for their own learning, and also for their future writing, where they will do it for others. And I've seen how, if children are taught that, their writing becomes quite amazing quite quickly. And then the second thing you said was how, if you know, using it as a linking device, you do sort of feel excited to go to the next key. And yeah, I must admit, that's when Tim and I wrote the final section of the book, where we linked, we made some example plans where we linked a whole lot of keys together. It was exciting to sort of see how, thinking through the keys, you suddenly went, oh, we could encounter this person here. Oh, we could. And it was a brand new way of thinking, even for us, even though we'd kind of invented the keys. I don't know, I can't really describe how pleasing it was. We both emailed each other and went, oh my gosh, this really works. It was like someone else had invented this way of thinking, but it was us. It was quite nice. Anyway, yeah, and so if we think about the benefits of this, it's really useful practically. It can drop us into the imagined world where we're going to do our story. It's very effective to link different keys together and make a sequence. It's also, yes, didn't say this, very useful for bringing the teaching to a close. You know, you look down at your watch, everybody's got a little bit engrossed and excited. It's the last day of term and you're still up in space. You can bring it to a close. You can you can have that sense of time passing, and 100 years later, people gathered to look back at the groundbreaking work that was done, and and it's great to remember that story closure thing, and it gives that sense of elevation and ritual and sincerity to it without having to stop. So that's what I was just saying there. The aesthetic, it's so important in this work. And it kind of lifts the proceedings into an aesthetic place when you use a storyteller voice. There are other ways, of course, to bring the aesthetic into the room, but I think the earlier you bring storytelling into this sort of storytelling voice into your work, the earlier the aesthetic will arrive, and then the children, the participants, shouldn't say children, should I? It's not always children. They want to hold that sense of the aesthetic. And this is another one. When I'm working with teachers, they often tell me that this is the hardest thing to remember, that when the children have started to kind of get a little bit loose, when the participants have got a bit loose and they feel like behavior is getting a bit fragmented, the biggest temptation is to reach for your kind of authority teacher voice and say, room 40, can I have everybody back, and sort of raise your voice. In fact, if you can reach for the storyteller voice, and so the spacemen, the astronauts listened to the creaking sound as the great wheel turned, or whatever it was. They will often kind of be drawn in by the story, and it can be an amazing way to actually refocus the class. I've seen that over and over, and the couple of times I've remembered to do it, it's been oh, that's good, I've got them back in with the story rather than just yelling at them. I guess it has some limitations. It isn't a standalone key. It almost is if you have that final step where you do a follow-up activity of some sort. But it is you kind of do need to think of it in association with other activities, the storytelling. Do take care of, as always, with working with historical context or cultural or sacred stories. We don't want to take liberties with those. You notice the little features that we did when we were telling the story of making sure that the location and the characters are accurate. It does take a bit of practice. I see Tim now teaching and using a narrative that he's just making up on the spot, but even a few years ago, even a couple of years ago, I would see him the night before we were going to teach something, writing that narrative and crafting it quite carefully. And I think you could see today we were needing to draft that a little bit. And so it is worth writing your story ahead of time. And yeah, like I say, it is quite tricky to remember to use it when the class is loose and you want to bring them in. It's sort of counterintuitive to go to this kind of soft, intriguing storyteller voice when what you want to do is control things. But it's a most wonderful. Have you ever done that, Kylie? Have you ever found yourself using storyteller voice to bring them in?
Yeah, I think I've given it a go, but if I haven't planned and pre-written it, it's not as effective because, like you saw with my example before, I do need a bit of time to craft and find the right words, enough description. So
yeah,
I'll keep working on it.
Keep working on that. Lovely. Yeah, and look, we always finish off by noting links to literacy and other curriculum learning areas and the key competences. What would you say? What would your thoughts be as teachers on that? Have we got? I mean, I think the links to literacy are quite evident there. What would you say?
Yeah, it's all literacy, isn't it? And the part of the curriculum we don't talk about within literacy a lot is listening. And you notice, like, the second time you read it, we listened with so much more attention because we're involved. So often I would do read mine twice when you use this tool. Yeah, but it's the power of listening and the way my students listened differently to any other time in the day. So and like picking up the details and inferencing and all of that.
So inferencing, the show not tell is a wonderful literacy skill to both use and to teach. The inferencing. Yeah, there's so much in there. Even the six elements of the context. That's a literacy tool for any imagined world that the children are going to write as well. What were you going to say, Jen?
And I was just going to say, depending on the world itself, you use specific language choices. So the students really drop themselves into that role and they use those language which is really amazing. So if you're thinking about astronauts, yeah, those key words, key vocabulary, they put into practice, which is great.
Great point. And I find myself, when I'm using storyteller and narrator voice, I find myself reaching for more complex and elaborate language, both technical language if you're on a space station, but also creatively, because you're going for that slightly poetic sound. So you're finding yourself reaching for words that on their own children might not understand, but because they're in that context, they so it's also elevating and offering elaborate vocabulary. Yeah, so much going on. I mean, it is all literacy there, right? And in terms of links to other curriculum learning areas, again, it's going to depend on your context. But we're right in the world of Joan Whiffen and paleontology and science and things, if that's what we want to explore. I don't think in and of itself it explores another curriculum learning area, but it definitely gets us into a world where that area can be explored, right? Or maybe you would say it does in that it's introducing some language, perhaps. Yeah. And that key competency of participating and contributing. Thanks for the point about needing to listen, Kylie, because what I do when I do the second one of these sessions is I'll probably read the bit of writing twice, because the participation kind of does depend on really working out what world you're in. So yeah, I haven't found a try this key that doesn't involve all the key competencies yet. You know, you've got to think, you've got to participate, you've got to kind of stop and let someone out, you know, take turns and listen to the facilitator and other children and so on. So they're pretty rich for what we're trying to do in the curriculum. Well, so that's about it. That's about what we've got for today. Once again, we really encourage you to have a go with Starter Story. And if you do use it, and I'm sure you will, please let us know and share it with us on the shared planning space. If I know it can be quite a hassle to write an email or to fill in the form with the example. Thank you, Ulysses, for doing it. You're actually one of very few who've done that so far. So just even flick me a quick message, and I'll I'll turn your email into something that will go on the form. Sorry, was someone's going to say something then? Did I interrupt someone? No. And we'll see you next time for the next key, which is we're meeting in April for a key that's called Step into a Moment, which again it sounds very like Step into History, but we've sequenced it slightly differently, and it allows you to do different things. What you will find is that now that we've talked about those 6 dimensions today and the working consciously with the planning for the context, you'll find that comes up time and time again. And I think those are a feature of Step into a Moment as well. So thank you so much for joining me this morning, and get well soon, Tim. Any final comments from the group before we close?
Thank you, Viv.
Thank you too. Thanks for joining me. It's always lovely to see you. And thank you, Jen, and thank you, Ulysses. I'll close with karakia then, just to close our space. So kua mutu a mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, manakatia mai mātou katoa, or mātou hoa, or mātou whānau, aio I te eorangi, which means our work is finished for the moment. Bless us all, our colleagues, our families, and peace to the universe. Thank you so much.